5 horizons. A period-by-period evidence synthesis of 2 mound landscapes. Garden Creek, in Haywood County, North Carolina, and Monk's Mound, at Cahokia, Illinois. Varro's Research. Film version 1.0. August 2026. 1 control before anything else. 5 periods are carried in parallel for both sites: Paleo-Indian, Archaic, Woodland, Mississippian, and Historic Post-Contact. Grades follow the standing 5-level system: proven, strong, supported, open, and not supported by the present evidence. Every radiocarbon determination cited in this film dates a feature, a context, or a deposit. None of them dates a disputed object. That boundary is the reason the 2 records can be compared at all. The 2 sites are not being compared because they are connected. They are being compared because they fail in the same places. Both are multi-period palimpsests whose accepted headline period suppresses the others in public description. Both hold a post-contact layer that is also the layer through which objects left the site. And both carry an open question at exactly the same structural point: is the earliest fabric older than the accepted phase? Nothing here implies cultural contact or common origin between the 2 localities. Part 1. The Paleo-Indian Horizon, roughly 10,000 to 8,000 BC. At Garden Creek, the Paleo-Indian answer is a clean negative. The regional sequence opens with Clovis, but the Canton synthesis records that no Clovis or other Paleo-Indian artifact was recovered at Garden Creek itself. The oldest point from the site is a Palmer-Kornenetched form, which is early Archaic, and the earliest documented use of the locality is placed around 8000 BC. At Cahokia, the answer is the opposite shape. The rebuilt American Bottom Lithic series shows presence in every period from Paleo-Indian through Mississippian, on multiple distinct diagnostic types per period. Presence survives collection bias because a collector's preference cannot manufacture type diagnostic forms that were never present. But the sample is collection-derived, and 6 non-diagnostic scraper records spanning 13,500 years inflate the early end of the curve. Presence is supported to strong. Intensity is open, and there is no dated Paleo-Indian context at the mound itself. Part 2. The Archaic, roughly 8000 to 1000 BC. This is where the 2 records diverge most sharply. Garden Creek carries the Archaic on typology alone. Early Archaic Palmer and Kirk, Middle Archaic Stanley, Morrow Mountain, and Guilford in a Pigeon River setting, and Late Archaic Savannah River and Ottar, with increased seasonal use, and the Highland Balds read as hunting and observation ground. Not one determination in the card series for 31HW1 reaches the Archaic. Occupation is supported. Archaic monumentality is not supported by the present evidence. Cahokia is the reverse. 4 non-anomalous interpretive center tract determinations run from 4570 plus or minus 210 down to 3110 plus or minus 80. That is dated occupation inside the Cahokia precinct rather than inferred occupation, and it is graded strong on the radiocarbon register, not on the lithic series. Then, there is feature 50A, an articulated primary dog burial on the 3rd terraced summit with about 50 grams of red ochre and a reported small plain vessel. Parmalee compared it morphologically to the Green River and Pickwick Archaic assemblages, and Ritchie early grave offering pattern points the same way. But Memorandum RC3, version 1.3, supplies the control that governs everything downstream. The 2 reported outcomes, 1 late Archaic or early woodland and 1 middle woodland, are 1 sample measured twice. They are not 2 independent witnesses. A 3rd portion failed for insufficient carbon and no numerical ages, uncertainties, laboratory identifiers, isotope values, or calibrated ranges have been published. The ochre carries no date at all. It is deposited from Paleo-Indian times through the Mississippian. So the burial context and the Archaic mortuary hypothesis are foundational. The direct assay chronology is open. Those are 2 different statements and they must stay apart. Feature 50 does not stand alone. 3 separate cannon deposits are now registered on the monument. F50 on the 3rd terrace summit is the only one that has been sampled. R17 holds a complete dog with human skeletal elements at the south ramp and 1st terrace gate, and F70 holds dog skull fragments and complete jaws with Mississippian sherds, Probable abrading stone fragments, charcoal and a dark organic matrix south of the palisade entrance. Their repeated placement at openings supports Reed's observation of intentional threshold patterning. Whether the three are contemporary is a testable question. It is not an assumption. Part 3. The Woodland. Roughly 1000 BC to AD. 1000. At one site this is the monumental horizon. At the other it is the surface the monument buried. At Garden Creek, the woodland is the monumental horizon. Early woodland Swannanoa, middle woodland Pigeon, then Kinnesti and Lake Kinnesti from AD 200 to 1000. Mound number 2 is a middle woodland Kinnesti platform raised in 2 stages and associated with Hopewellian interaction, and GX 730 dates charcoal from Mound 2. Feature 30, with Kinnesti ceramics, at 1145 plus or minus 85 before present. The exchange record matches Ohio Flint Ridge Chalcedony, Tennessee Cherts, and Marginella shell beads of ultimately Floridian or Caribbean origin. At Monk's Mound the woodland is underneath. Late with the One woodland finding at Garden Creek has to be stated precisely, because it cuts both ways. The controlled RLA record for 31HW2 includes figurine limbs and fragments, figurine parts, and a clay effigy. That establishes a controlled ceramic representational tradition at the site and defeats any claim that figural categories are foreign to it. It does not authenticate the disputed carved steatite corpus. Different material, different locus, and a largely middle woodland context. Steatite is worked at Garden Creek, but as vessels, pipes, gorgets, and discoidals. No zoomorphic or anthropomorphic carved steatite image appears in the parsed catalog for any of the 3 loci. The AA series of AMS determinations sits inside the woodland range, but it is listed without context in the card summary view and remains a verification item. Part 4. The Mississippian, of the AD 1000 to 1450. The accepted headland period at both sites and the one that is least secure at the larger of the 2. Garden Creek's Mississippian is small, but it is dated. Mound number 1 is a Pisgah's South Appalachian Mississippian platform mound, and GX 595 dates charcoal from Mound 1, Feature 10, with Pisgah series ceramics at 515 plus or minus 70 before present. Mound 1 produced summit-side burials, more than half with grave goods, with earth lodge and platform mound architecture. The charred plant record is exactly what a Pisgah's agricultural village produces: corn and charred cobs, corn and bean wording, nuts and nutshell, walnut hulls, acorn and charred cane, with charred beams pointing to burned architecture. Cahokia is monumental, and here the chronology is weaker than the reputation. Memorandum RC 2 shows that Reed 1968 does not radiocarbonate the beginning of Monk's Mound. I-2308 sits in Stage C above undated stages at NB and may be residual. M1636 is the only determination tied to a central mass surface, and its stage attribution is disputed. I-2947 belongs to the later First Terrace, and M1637 dates a residence at the base of the western slump age. The familiar AD 900 to 1150 span is Reed's abstract figure. It is not an established foundation to completion period. What the 2007 exposures actually documented is worth separating from what has been claimed about them. Sod block construction is directly documented. Deliberate selection of red, yellow, white, gray, brown, and black sediment is strongly supported. Intentional limonite facing is not demonstrated, and iron pan banding in turf monuments is a proven emergent redox process on the Danish turf barrow analogy. That analogy supplies a formation mechanism and a testing program. It does not supply a mineral engineering conclusion. Feature 1 is a proven upright bald cypress post about 30 centimeters in diameter with associated limestone slabs at roughly 143.7 meters above sea level on the east exposure. Its charnel house reading is a foundational hypothesis, plausible but not demonstrated. The Archaeabazony places the broadest direct association around 1080 to 1120. And in January 1998, contractors drilling horizontally into the west side passed through approximately 32 feet of stone, about 140 to 150 feet in and 40 feet below the second terrace surface. The Garden Creek, Mississippian record also carries the strongest mortuary and exchange signal at the locality. Mound number 1 holds shell gorgets, shell beads, a conch whorl pendant and a conch shell dipper, both flagged with burial. Marine whelk and conch in the Appalachian interior is itself Gulf or Atlantic coastal exchange, and discoidals across all three loci register a late prehistoric chunky and game ceremonial class. RLA specimen 2021 A958 is catalogued as bead anklet 24 and wampum belt 28, quantity 52, status repatriated. All three loci are recorded as likely Cherokee, Pisgah, and Ancestral in the NAPRA inventory, and each already carries a repatriated subset. 21 at 31HW1, 9 at 31HW2, and 1 at 31HW7. These records are handled under NAPRA controls. They are not pressed into object authentication arguments. Part 5. Historic, post-contact. From roughly 1450 to the present day. At Garden Creek, the historic horizon is inside the native mound. The Qualla phase runs from AD 1450 to the removal of 1838 and 1839, and the Piscata-Qualla transition is framed as a cultural continuum. GX 596 dates Mound 1, Feature 25, with Qualla pottery and trade material at 500 plus or minus 100. GX 729 dates Mound 1, Square 215 R 145, Zone A, with Qualla pottery and a cast bronze bell at 205 plus or minus 65. That bell is a European trade form, and it supplies the contact era horizon at Mound 1. The same locus carries the disturbance signature. The controlled catalog concentrates coal, slag, iron, lead, brass, glass, and a peach pit at 31HW1. That is a meaningful disturbance and makes deposition signal, and it is a caution against treating any single Mound 1 context as sealed. Prunus persica is a European introduction, so the peach pit is the lone contact period intrusive in the botanical set, and it dates its own context and nothing else. A wampum belt row and a village catlinite lump belong to the same later discussion, tied to the Calumet era and the fur trade. The boundary is firm. Mixed period markers flag disturbance and terminus postquem. They do not date any associated object, and they are not evidence of pre-contact metal or industrial activity. At Monk's Mound, the historic layer is not inside the monument. It is on top of it. Excavations between 1964 and 1972 identified a French colonial chapel on the first terrace with an associated Cahokia lignite occupation, pits, a probable indigenous dwelling, and a cemetery dated to about 1735 to 1752. The chapel was reconstructed from wall trenches and post molds as an approximately 18 by 30 foot potox and terrace structure. 6,573 glass beads were recovered, 11 necklace beads and 6,562 seed beads. The assemblage also held faience, lead glazed earthenware, gaming discs, bottle blast tools, hardware, knives, gun flints, bells, catlinite and marine shell. Of more than 1,000 indigenous sherds, exactly one was identified as post-contact. The excavated burials were women and children. That material is culturally sensitive and it is not reducible to an artifact display. After the mission comes the trading post and the land record. La Cantine, a trading post of 1776 to 1784, is reconstructed near the river Elab or Canteen Creek on the lower side of the Great Knob. Its exact location is open, and 1,803 deed mentions a stone near a mound and remains of an indigenous camp, and 1,808 survey recorded 24 or more mounds, the largest with a base near 6 acres and a height near 100 feet. Deeds trace Trappist acquisition and sale of two 400-acre claims. In 1831, Amos Hill sank a 90-foot well from the second terrace, and pottery, charred corn and 2 seashells were reported at 60 feet of depth. That well is a pointwise constraint only. Its plan position is not established, so no geometry can be derived from it against the 1998 stone mass. Hill also leveled material off the second terrace. Human bones, stone implements, and unburned earthenware vases. That is a dispersal event, and what was lost was not the object. It was the context. Part 6. The Comparative Register. 5 periods, 2 sites, graded side by side. Read across the register and the pattern is clean. Paleo-Indian, not supported at Garden Creek, supported to strong at Cahokia but undated. Archaic, supported on typology at Garden Creek, strong on radiocarbon at Cahokia. Woodland, strong at both, but monumental at one and buried at the other. Mississippian, strong and dated at Garden Creek, monumental but chronologically open at Monk's Mound. Historic, strong at both, in one case inside the mound and in the other on top of it. 4 things the 2 records hold in common, and they are structural rather than cultural. First, the accepted headline period is net the whole occupation. Both sites are palimpsests, and in both cases the public description flattens them. Second, the strongest dating instrument at each site dates a feature, not an object. Every argument that jumps from a feature date to an object age fails at the same joint. Third, the post-contact layer is also the dispersal layer. Trade goods arrive through the same opening that objects left by. Fourth, the earliest fabric question is open at both. At Garden Creek, that is the Precanesti sequence. At Monk's Mound, it is whether an older core underlies the Mississippian monument. What each record needs next is specific, and in both cases it is recoverable. At Garden Creek, calibrate the card series and verify every determination against its primary publication. Obtain contexts for the AAAMS series. Get an official RLA export carrying context and sample numbers for the peach pit, the charred beams, the corn and bean rows, and the historic metals, coal and slag rows. And get object-level provenience, condition, and toolmark data for clay figurine and steatite rows before any of them is set beside the disputed corpus. At Monk's Mound, the original feature 50 laboratory record and surviving material. Independent AMS on separate portions, because the 2 reported outcomes are 1 sample measured twice. Direct dates from sealed lower fabric in more than 1 sector and profiles that distinguish older mound fabric from later intrusion. And the planned position of the 1,831 hill well, without which that datum is worth nothing. 5 horizons. Compilation and source control. Barrow's research. Research. Samantha Waddell. No grade in either controlling report is altered by this film, and all radiocarbon ages are uncalibrated before present as printed in the source tables.